Well, welcome to another edition of Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. Today I am really grateful and blessed to have in studio today with us Joel Relampagos, who actually has become, I'd consider, a close friend. I mean, he walked in the door today and I feel like I've known you my whole fucking life. It's crazy, Joel.
Yeah, seriously, a brother.
Yeah,
Instant
man.
brothers.
Thank you
sure.
Thank you for being here, and we're here today on a special day. Joel celebrates 500 days of continuous sobriety, which is anybody who's struggled with addiction knows is a big deal. So we're actually excited that you're here on this day, and we're looking forward to breaking down your story and talking about what you've been through, because like me, you had, from an external standpoint, a lot of great things going on, but inside, there was something missing, and we'll talk about what that was and how you found it, and just really so appreciative that you're willing to overcome out loud. And, I can't wait to talk about Change Your Algorithm and all the things that you're doing now, because you have turned from, an addictive life of one of emptiness to really fulfilling and really of service. And it's the world is a better place with you in it, in this version of yourself. So thanks for being here, man.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's great. So where did it all start for you? I know you're originally your mom's from the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
Were you born in the Philippines?
Yeah, so I was born in the Philippines. I moved here exactly on my 6th birthday. And, full-on immigrant family, grew up basically in Southern California. And, I was supposed to be a doctor.
That's right.
4 sisters. So the rule is, daughters become nurses and sons become doctors. And I was like, oh, I hate the sight of blood, but I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. So
all the way to med school.
Getting into, UCLA and then thinking, okay, all right, well, here goes nothing, But I remember when my dad had a heart attack, I was very much like, wow, he almost left this planet, this life, not knowing, my truth. Because not only did I not want to be a doctor, I was also in the closet.
Right.
So I was like, I got to be open and honest about who I am and what I want to do.
How long did you stay in the closet?
I would say 16. At the age of 16 was when I started to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I grew up in a strict Catholic Filipino home, and there was just a shame that came along with it, where you're not supposed to be, gay, and you're not supposed to be, in that lifestyle, if you will. So already, on top of being an immigrant and then being in the closet and then having, not knowing what career I wanted to do, there was like, gosh, am I going to fit anything? Am I ever going to feel accepted in something? But when my dad had that heart attack, I was like, okay, I need to do something. So I remember thinking that I wanted to tell my story and show other people that there's nothing wrong with you. You have nothing to be ashamed of, because I wanted to feel like I had nothing to be ashamed of. And I'm not kidding, Charlie. That night that I came back from the hospital, I went online and then I saw that MTV was casting for a documentary called True Life, I'm Coming Out. And so I wrote down my story. I didn't even proofread it. I was just so passionate, tears in my eyes. And then I was like, I want to come out of the closet on camera, and I want to show people that they have nothing to be ashamed of. 2 weeks later, MTV calls me. They said, we want to film you, but you got to tell your family that this is about college kids growing up. And that it's not about coming out of the closet, because I had to do it on camera. And I was like, ooh, okay. And so I told my family, MTV's coming down to do this documentary about college kids. Came out to my sisters. They were awesome. Came out to my dad. He was so accepting. He just wanted me to be happy. Tried to do that to my mom, and she kicked the camera crew out. And I was like, I do not want to be one of those people on a show that the words on the screen says Joel tried to come out to his mother, but was unable to do so. And so the camera crew flew back. I hid my camera behind dinner flowers, and this is when I knew I wanted to be a producer. I was like, Mom, let's have dinner and let's chat. And it was the most honest 60 minutes of tape ever. I came out to her, and she was very resistant about the truth. And then eventually I took that tape, I sent it to MTV, and then they were like, she has to sign our guest release. I'm like, oh, geez. Eventually she just became so I think exhausted by the fact that like, there's nothing changing him, you know. And then when she saw the show, it was just a great sign from the universe, because it was like holding a mirror up in front of somebody. And then she started to realize that, you know, that's not how she wanted or should be treating, you know, me. And it really happened for a reason. And ever since then, she just turned a new leaf. She was so accepting. Anybody I dated, like, she ended up like loving more than like she loved me, and I was all for it, you know. But it was all because of the power of storytelling. So to circle back, if there was any reason why I wanted to be a doctor, it was because I would want to save lives. And then I realized that there is more than one way to save a life, and that's being able to tell your story in front of millions and then have them go, oh, I'm not alone.
It's such a big thing, and you and I share so many passions. But I think one of the things that I'm always drawn to is recognizing the two dials that we have in our lives. Right, there's our beliefs and our behaviors, and you know, I think you and I share through active addiction. You know, when those are out of alignment, you know, what we believe about ourselves is one thing, but the way we're acting is another. And was that part of the struggle for you, especially being in the closet and feeling shame? You know, shame and guilt is such a toxic emotion for anybody, and so, you know, not being your authentic self and feeling like you can't fit in anywhere must have felt lonely, is what I would imagine.
Yeah, it definitely felt lonely, because even though I had come out of the closet, I was still dealing with, and this is gonna, you know, tie into my beliefs, I was still dealing with not receiving the love and attention that I wanted from my mother, truthfully, growing up. You know, she was going through depression, all that stuff. And as a child, you don't really know what that is. But you do start to create this belief system of, oh, I'm not good enough.
That's right.
You know, because she's not hugging me as much as I would like, so there must be something wrong with me. And so that transpired into an addiction to alcohol in my adulthood,
because it became a core belief that I'm not good enough. Core belief. You know, I grew up with a violent father, and so I was abused for the better part of 15 years, violently and physically, and so I had that same programming. I think people misunderstand that the trauma is trauma, and disassociation is disassociation. If you're not getting your needs met at a young age, it really can distort the wiring in your head. And so you start, I think you've done a miraculous job of describing it kind of as your mind lies to you, and you were lovable, but your mom wasn't able to love you the way, so you then internalized, something must be wrong with me.
That's exactly right. And I remember my first time seeing a therapist 8 years ago, and they're like, have you experienced any traumas in your life? And I was like, no, not at all. I didn't witness any murders or any, wacky car accidents. And she's like, okay, that's interesting. But now that I look back and I'm mindful about everything, I go, traumas don't have to be this, giant thing that we all think that it is. Like for me, my mom never said that I was a failure. She never said that, I'm a piece of crap and I'm going to amount to nothing. Like the lack of feedback made me create a story. So even just like the non-existence of communication can be a trauma depending on what your belief is. And the belief that I created was that I'm not good enough.
And so now you start to thought stack, and you're in the closet, and there's shame and guilt associated with being gay, and so not good enough here, not good enough there. And so when did alcohol, I always call it a chemical solution to an emotional problem. When did you find the chemical solution? When did alcohol become your crutch?
So in my 20s, like many people in their 20s, I was drinking, but I was very focused on being, a young TV executive producer. So after I did that MTV show, I called them, they gave me a job, and then I was just moving up in my 20s. Eventually by, 30, 31, I became an executive producer. A majority of my work has been with NBC's The Biggest Loser, which ironically is about addiction, but for food. What I realized was that no matter what I was doing, I was getting the money, the house, the car, the promotions, the big shows. I felt like it wasn't enough, right? Like no matter what I did, no matter where I traveled to, who I was dating, what car I was driving, I'm putting all this money into my bank account. I was like, why is this not enough? And I remember drinking, and it got to the point where it was 2 bottles of wine a night. And truthfully, I didn't feel like any of that was enough because I didn't feel like I was enough, you know? So to be able to look at my life on paper, oh, awesome. But to be able to, as you and I were talking about, look at myself in the mirror, that was something I couldn't do.
Yeah, the mirror is an incredible predictor of our own image, and like myself and so many people that I talk to, and I think this is a great lesson for people that are listening, which is when you chase satisfaction in external things, when you focus on the prize instead of the present, and you focus on when I get something, whatever it is for any of us. And that's why I'm so passionate about what we're doing here and so grateful for you to be on, because from the outside, the great boyfriend, the great job, I mean, executive producer, one of the most popular shows on TV, everyone's like, Joel's got it all, but there's this double life that most of us lead. To the outside world, that's what we want you to see.
That's right.
But inside, we don't feel like we deserve it. And when we chase, we're always chasing, right?
That's exactly right. I was living a duplicitous life. Those 2 bottles of wine that I would drink was on my own, like it was in my backyard. And then especially after I went through my breakup in my early 30s, now I was really living on my own. And now I was really going in the backyard, just drinking my sorrows away. Wake up the next day with a hangover, press a soda can over my eyes, and then put, cologne on. There was like a whole shtick. Like I accepted the fact that every morning I'm going to wake up with a hangover. It's going to hurt, but I just got to flip that switch back on and be like the Joel that everybody knows and loves. And then once work's done, go back to a liquor store. And I had 3 liquor stores that I would go to because I was so ashamed to go to the same one every single night. I had this pattern, and I had this life that nobody knew about. And it was getting exhausting. And like you said, it's like we're trying to gain all these things, but it was really destination addiction. And destination addiction is when you have the idea that happiness exists in a place outside of yourself. And that's what I was trying to do. I was always looking for the next destination, but eventually it was just that chase for happiness, because when I get there, I go, this is enough. And then I look for the next thing. And that's what I thought I had to do in order to find happiness. I thought success was tons of money, good job, all that stuff. And then eventually I'll feel good enough, but I still didn't feel good enough. And so once I get to that point of, well, what else can I do? Then I came up with another belief of there really is something wrong with me. Then what is my purpose in life? What is my point of living if I'm going to keep doing this?
And it's amazing, and talk about for just a second, because it's not lost on me, how those what are normal things in life, like a breakup of a relationship that's not working out, is sad, and you grieve it, but when it reinforces that negative core belief of not good enough, it takes on a whole different level, right? So I'm sure that as you were kind of building this false narrative around this not good enough, that it doesn't take much of these normal occurrences, and I think you and I today could both say that, relationships have come and gone in sobriety or in our lives, but they don't require us to damage ourselves or anyone else. But when you have a false narrative around not good enough, this is just further evidence that I'm not good enough.
Oh yeah, and it would tie into everything. If somebody didn't text me back, not good enough. If I was getting low ratings, show not good enough. And so once a breakup happens, it's like the epitome of me really feeling not good enough within a relationship with somebody else, because now it's triggering that relationship that I had with my mother.
Yeah, and you and I will talk about in your new endeavors how important, what we seek we find, right? Expectancy theory says when we focus on our problems expand, and I see a man today who's focused on the solution and focused on a full life, and you're finding that in everything that you're doing. So we really can change our perspective, can't we, Joel?
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
What was the bottom? So I always like to kind of get to that point where it's like just sick and tired of being sick and tired, and those dials, right? I mean, it's like the belief dial is I'm not good enough, and the behavior dial is shame and guilt based, and the universe is proving both of those things to be true. And like you said, it does get exhausting, and what was the catalyst for you to say enough, man?
Yeah, the catalyst was I was filming on location a little over a year and a half ago, and I was in my hotel room, and it was beautiful, but the inside of the hotel room was just bottles of wine. And I remember sneaking out bottles to the trash can outside because I didn't even want the cleaning lady to know how much I was drinking. Like, that's how much shame I was in, you know? And then it was just like hangover number 1 million, and it hurt, and it was like 3 p.m. and my dogs were there. Like, I hadn't walked my dogs, and like it just felt miserable. Like, I felt like I was officially in despair. I was definitely still drunk. And then eventually I called my dad, and again, signs from the universe. My dad was with all my sisters having dinner, and I was like, Dad, I need help. I have a drinking problem. I need to go to rehab. So not only did my dad find out that I had a drinking problem, like, he found out that it got so bad that I needed to get help, you know, at that level. And by the way, if anyone's listening, it's not bad to get help. But for me, you know, that was giant news to deliver to my dad. And then he said, you know, make it back safely. I'm going to look into some rehabs for you. My sisters were emotional on the phone, of course, because they didn't know. Like, nobody knew, you know. And then eventually I got back, and I was like, I don't need help.
Of course.
I'm like, I'm fine now. The hangover went away.
Yeah, it's all
I'm
in the
like,
rearview
no,
mirror.
I think it's good. I think I learned my lesson. I'm good. And then my dad's like, no. I looked into some places. And my sister came to my house because she took the dogs because I was going to be gone. And I was like, I don't think I need to go, actually. I think I'm going to be fine. She's like, no, I'm going to take the dogs. And then my dad came so he can drive me to the rehab place in Ventura. And I felt like I was a contestant on one of my shows, because I was like, I'm moving into a place with a bunch of other people. Everyone's very different, and I'm basically enclosed, like, in this set, if you will. I felt so uncomfortable because I was so used to doing whatever I wanted, you know, getting in my car, going to the liquor store, all that stuff, doing shows. And now I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to face myself. And this whole place is just about getting better, you know? So
Yeah.
it was the opposite of what I had been doing.
Right, we've been running, right? I mean, I remember when I walked into the therapist I was lying to for about 6 months about my drinking, because like you, I led that same double life. You know, I mean, I was running a business and had from the outside a lot of successes, and you know, he said it's over. And I said, what's over? He said it's all over. I was like, man, there's a lot wrong right now. I mean, I didn't even know where to begin. And you know, let's talk a little bit about those three important words, because I think when I ask people the most important thing about their journey out of that darkness was, I need help. And
Yeah.
you know, it's and what's amazing to me, I don't know anyone who hasn't had this experience. When you finally ask for help, it's amazing how many people really want to help, isn't it, Joel?
Right. It
I mean,
really
they were
is.
really, I mean, they were so happy that you would acknowledge that this life you were living wasn't the one you wanted, but you didn't know how to get out. And I think I just encourage people to have the courage to ask for help, because so many of us want to help.
That's right. It's so, so true. And again, I created this belief that asking for help is weakness, that asking for help shows that you're falling apart. But for me, asking for help is the opposite of that. Asking for help means that you're strong. Asking for help means that people are going to come to you, and then those that really love you, they're going to show up for you. And it was the best feeling, knowing that the people that I love showed up for me. And there was that sense of strength as soon as I got it off my chest. And I was like, well, this isn't weakness then. Like, how can this be weakness when I feel so strong that I finally got this off my chest?
Yeah, I see a man in whom, like many of us, you just started to turn those dials to the truth. It was
That's
like, I'm
right.
going to figure out who I am and get my beliefs aligned with some different behaviors, because I think you knew, like George Mumford, who's an international performance expert, who's worked with the Lakers and the Bulls. He knew, I think, what you know, which is the guy that walked into that rehab, in his case a detox, couldn't walk out. You know, it had to be a different guy.
That's
because
right.
the same guy that went in, if he doesn't come out different, he's going to be looking for the same solution. And what I'm amazed at is, you know, sitting here with you 500 days after this event, how different the man in front of me is, because what you've done, you know, and I think what I really want to emphasize for people is, it seems overwhelming, right? I mean, if you look back
It does.
500 days ago at the bottom, it seems, how am I going to be able to deal with all this? There's a lot wrong.
Yeah.
But it's just those small, simple steps. I mean, if you can move forward in the direction of a life that you want, those small, simple steps, if you just have the courage to keep walking them, that it does get better.
That's right. And trusting that it is going to get better. Because I remember day one in rehab, I wrote in my journal, day one, I have no idea who this person is that doesn't drink. And I'm nervous to meet this person. You know, I had no idea. I didn't know what my life was like without alcohol. I'd been drinking for 17 years. And now here I am 500 days later, and I'm like, that's the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Because I am so much more clear-headed, and I'm more passionate. I created this story that 500 days ago that I'm not going to be funny, I'm not going to be outgoing, I'm not going to be fun, sobriety is boring. I was so wrong. You know, like I get goosebumps talking about it, but I genuinely feel like this isn't a challenge for me. This is an opportunity for a new life. And I remind myself every single day.
I feel like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there was a 4 or 5 year old version of Joel Relampagos that is now consistent with who I feel like. You feel like this is who I always wanted to be.
That's
you know,
right.
this is my innocence reincarnated, because I wanted to be this. I always thought I was this who you are today.
That's
but
right.
I lost him, and I've found him now. And I remember, and we'll talk about Change Your Algorithm. And one of the first Change Your Algorithm sessions that I went to was actually on inner child work, and we had
Right.
little pictures of our kids, and I was able to talk to you and Alex a little bit about my upbringing, and I had my picture of little Charlie. And you know, I used to be embarrassed of
Right.
a version of me.
Right.
You know, and today I'm more attached to that really cool kid that I lost, you know. And
That's
I
right.
feel like you're, you know, back to who you really always wanted to be.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That kid, that 6-year-old Joel who was hurt, that felt like he wasn't loved by his mom, not getting enough affection. What happened in rehab wasn't me going to classes about, here's why alcohol is bad for you. Here's what you're putting in your body. Honestly, that would make me drink more. You know, I'd be like, okay. What changed my life in rehab was that I was doing inner child work, you know, and so I would meditate and literally picture what I looked like at the age of 6, as if he was right in front of me, because he was right in front of me. I knew what he smelled like. I knew what his hair looked like, what his laugh looked like. And I was, for the first time in my life, had connected with that 6-year-old who was so hurt, who was so angry. And I told him everything that he needed to hear, because it was true, and he didn't feel like he was good enough. And then once I separated myself as a 6-year-old and he was right in front of me, it just changed my life. And I got out of that meditation with tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
And I wrote in my journal, and I was like, I am never going to let that kid go. Every single day, like, I'm going to be hanging out with that kid, because that kid is awesome. And even now when people pay me compliments, I'll secretly compliment that kid. I'll be like, did you hear that? That was for you, bud. And then when he starts feeling good, I start feeling good. Because I remember before, people would be like, embrace your inner child. I'm like, I don't know how to do that. Like, what? Okay. But it was so inward, like really picturing to T, like what that kid looked like and how he felt, really feeling that, as if it's an actual child right in front of you. And I did that, and now I basically have a kid. I'm a parent now.
Absolutely. and you're doing a great fucking job, by the way, dude.
And everywhere I go, like, I was in Zion, I picture him like next to me. I'm like, are you having fun, dude? He's like, yeah, I'm having a blast. Because now he's getting the attention that he wanted at 6. Now he's feeling worthy, because he didn't feel worthy at 6. You know, now he feels loved. You know, I used to have all those things. I thought I was like ugly, even suicidal ideations. I was like, there's no purpose in anything, you know? So now I get to go, all right, it's not just me as a guy in my 30s. I'm going to talk to that kid, because he deserves to live. He's funny. He's talented. He's awesome. He's going to change the world. You know, he just needed to know that, you know?
And that, I'll say it the way I always say it, which is, it is my responsibility to heal him. There is no one left to heal what hurts him except for me. And so that's what you just described. And when you put that goal in his mind, it's amazing how he reacts, because what you've done And now let's talk about, because if this conversation doesn't give you hope, I don't know what will, because we've both been in the darkest of dark places. We felt overwhelmed.
Mm-hmm.
We felt there was no way out. We started to change, and today we both sit here, like brothers in arms,
Mm-hmm.
ready for an exciting life. And let's talk about what you've done in your, new version of Joel, because Change Your Algorithm is literally, when I think about the messages you've portrayed on TV have been life-changing and life-saving, as you wanted to do as a doctor. But what you're doing with Change Your Algorithm, and we'll talk about how to find Joel and find his Change Your Algorithm organization, because they really are remarkable. Can you talk about where that came from, and talk about how people can find that, and what its purpose is?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I got out of rehab, I remember thinking, well, I guess the next step for me is to own my own television production company, because that's what executive producers do. And it didn't feel aligned with my truth. And I was like, well, maybe I should just executive produce a really big show, because that's what executive producers do. And then I found myself again doing the societal expectation thing, because I was so good with
the ego got
the parental
rebuilt.
expectation,
Yeah.
societal expectation. I'm like, it doesn't feel aligned. So now I learned I have this skill now to go, all right, authentically, what do I want to do? And I remember telling myself, I was like, if I change my life, I want other people to know that they can do that as well. And so I made a decision to be unanonymous about my recovery.
For sure.
And I used my skills in media to tell my story, and then the pandemic happened, and basically everyone was really going through it. And so what I did was I reached out to a bunch of therapists and my partner, Alex, best friend. We were like, let's come up with a program where, whether you're recovering from addiction, a relationship, racism, a pandemic, whatever it is, we're all recovering from something.
That's right.
You can attend this program absolutely for free and get free mental health support. And luckily, we found a bunch of therapists that volunteer their time to attend these virtual classes. And then people just show up, and then they hear stories from other people, different types of people, gender, sexual orientation, ages, religion. And then they go, wow, we really are all recovering from something, and that's okay. Because I also didn't like the stigma towards addiction, where it's like, oh, you're recovering, right? And I go, no, we're all recovering from something.
We call ourselves stigma smashers, you and I, because I share the same. It's like, if someone were to say, my life's falling apart, my marriage is falling apart, my significant other doesn't want to be with me, I feel empty inside, and I saved up all my money, and I'm going to a Tony Robbins course in Florida for a weekend, I'd be like, that's great, man.
That's
good
right.
for you. It's like, but if you say the same things and it's because of drinking, so I'm going to go get treatment for, I'm sorry. It's too bad you've got a drinking problem.
That's right.
It's like, I'm going to change my life. I mean, and that's all we're doing. And addiction and substance abuse, it comes from a mental condition. It comes from a mind place.
That's
it comes from it's an obsession of the mind. It's a failing of the mind. And whether it's the stories we tell ourselves, we're looking to numb those out or avoid dealing with them. And so what you've done is used an incredible platform of honesty and authenticity, because being vocal about recovery allows other not to feel alone. And how important, I think you and I both share so many things, but the importance of connection. What you've done with Change Your Algorithm is you've made people feel connected to one another. And we're not supposed to be alone in this world. We're built for connection. We're built to be together. And I think there's a TED Talk that was given, I forget the guy's name, who talked about the opposite of addiction is connection. It's not sobriety. It's physical sobriety is important, and I think without physical sobriety, all bets are off. But just being physically sober isn't enough for me. I want to be connected to a purpose like you.
That's right, because I don't want to white knuckle it where it's like, don't drink. And by the way, the mind doesn't hear the word don't, so all it's going to hear is drink. So basically, the reason why I called it Change Your Algorithm was because I wanted people to understand the premise of all of this in a very simplistic way. And I go, well, think about tech or technology. When there's an algorithm for something like in social media, we kind of abide by it and we go, oh, that's the algorithm, right? But we're a lot like tech stuff and computers, because we sleep to recharge, we look for connection, we can store a ton of data, but when computers have malfunctions, and our human malfunctions are anxiety, addiction, depression, when computers have a quote-unquote malfunction, they can reprogram themselves. And then I say, well, you're the same. We forget that we can actually reprogram ourselves the same way that I reprogrammed my belief that I wasn't good enough or that I wasn't worthy. And then people go, oh, I get it. So that's why it's called change your algorithm. And I go, yes, because if you change, your software, your belief system, then you can change the algorithm of your life. Because I remember thinking my algorithm was always going to be, I'm addicted, I'm sad, I'm depressed, nothing's good enough, I'm not good enough, right? And then once I tapped into that software, which was my inner child, reprogramming those beliefs, like everything else changed. Like in the past year and a half, the opportunities that have risen has been so overwhelmingly awesome for me. And it's, again, just by speaking your own truth, and we all have a story to tell. And I want people to know that if you are, going through a dark time, like this doesn't have to be a dark time for the rest of your life. Just because you have a bad day doesn't mean you have a bad life. Like there is a way out, and it's so powerful to know that, Charlie, you've done this, I've done this, where our services are out there, I have therapists that change your algorithm that are willing to help. And truthfully, it's like enough with the shame of anxiety and depression and the shame of, oh, this person's addicted. It's like, we're all human. It's so easy to post your highlight reel on social media and be like, oh, everything's perfect. And right now that I am how I am, I'm more interested in talking to people about their scars versus people trying to prove to me that they don't have any. And there's a lot of people out there in the world that are trying to prove that they don't have any scars. I used to be one of them. But once I started to talk about my scars and help people heal from them, I was healing myself too.
That's right.
So there's reciprocity in this.
Yeah, it fills us up, and really, people should know what they don't deal with is going to deal with them. I mean, if you're running from your authentic self, if you're out of alignment, if you have these beliefs about yourself and your behaviors are not consistent with those, ultimately, the check always gets paid, man. And it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And one of the things I was excited to do is walk me through the week at Change Your Algorithms, because, we go from mindfulness to boundaries. I mean, walk us through the kinds of things that people have access to, because it is a full capsule of mental wellness. It's a full capsule of whatever kind of issue, because it really is a software issue. I mean, but if we talked about neuroplasticity, we talked about neural pathways, people might say, what are these scientists talking about? And
right.
So that's why I love Change Your Algorithm, because, right. But we do have the ability to reprogram what doesn't serve us anymore. And
that's
instead
right.
of fighting for our limitations, we can really get excited about our dreams. But we've got this negative bias, whether you're in recovery or not, that tells us that something bad's going to happen. And it
right.
really takes a concerted effort of mental conditioning. And that's what I love about your program. So walk us through a week. Tell us how Mondays go and where we end up on
Yeah,
Fridays.
Absolutely. So basically, when I started Change Your Algorithm, Mondays was all about reprogramming the mind. And again, I tell people, it's like, look, your laptop isn't exactly using Windows 97 right now, is it? No. If it were, no. It'd be really hard for it to function. And so when we're going through these tough times, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because it's your body saying, like, it's time to upgrade your software, right? And it's just saying, like, and it's possible. And then you upgrade your software, and then everything's functioning. It's not going to function perfectly, because progress over perfection any day. But Monday's all about reprogramming the mind and tapping into your subconscious, which is 90% of your mind, and how that can change the 10%, which is your conscious mind. And people find it so fascinating, the same way that I found it fascinating when I was learning about it in treatment. And then Tuesday, when we started, was about gratitude, being able to be grateful for things, counting your blessings versus your problems, understanding what thinking errors are, because I used to be somebody that used to filter out the positive. I know millions of people that can filter out the positive, where it's like you can get 99 answers right on the test, but that one answer that you got wrong, you're like, oh, why is this?
Yeah.
Why did I'm so stupid, So gratitude I find to be so healing. Wednesday's all about fulfillment, and basically fulfillment is what you can actually achieve in all aspects of your life. I used to be somebody that just focused on career, money, house, but then there's like the part of you, there's a spiritual part of you, there's that relationship with yourself, the inner child relationship. And that to me is like 360-degree fulfillment. Thursdays, when we started, was a tough one because it was finding forgiveness and letting go of that resentment, that anger, whether it's towards other people or yourself, which is the toughest.
Right.
And finding forgiveness for yourself. And Fridays, setting boundaries. So being able to, I always say, understand what your values are. Otherwise, you don't know what your boundaries are, because values to me is like building a house, right? That's your house of values. And without your house of values, you're kind of putting up a fence wherever. You're like,
Yeah.
I think my boundaries are here.
Right.
But once you know what your values are, then you know what you're protecting. And now for me, it's like my values are integrity, honesty, sobriety, love, kindness, compassion. And so anything that crosses those lines, I'm like, no. Boundaries.
And do you also use those to make decisions? I mean, I hear you talking about the projects you're working on because, God gave you a certain amount of gifts. I mean, you didn't go from med school to taking a video of your mom and you in the kitchen and realize that you had a gift for producing. You have a gift for being of service to TV studios and actors that want to produce something, and you're now applying those same values to the kind of projects you want to work on. So everything seems to be in alignment. And I think when we're in alignment, man, it feels good, huh?
And it feels great because it doesn't feel like I wasted my skills as an executive producer, because now I'm applying it to mental health. Because what I'm really trying to do is break the mental health stigma. And truthfully, if you're going to break a stigma about something, you need to normalize it and put it in mainstream. So any visuals you see of Change Your Algorithm isn't, your stereotypical, are you depressed? And here's a cloud with thunder, shot of the guy by the dumpster. And it's more like, hey, we're changing your algorithm. Everyone goes through anxiety, and we got like neon colors and whatnot, because I want the people who were like me to go, oh, that person's like me, and like this doesn't look uncool. Like I actually would sign up for this, and people get pleasantly surprised when they meet people in the community that are just like you and me, because there was a point where I felt like an addict was somebody that was in a subway with, a paper bag.
Sure.
And that's why for years I was like, oh, I'm not addicted to alcohol because I'm not the guy passed out in the subway.
Yeah, that's right. And I went through the same thing. And like you, I mean, there were a lot of people when I had to find sobriety that said, I didn't know you had a problem. It's like, well, that's because you don't know how I'm actually living. They didn't see your hotel. They didn't see my hotel room with the bottles everywhere and the the chopped up Vicodin on my counter. They didn't see how I was living because I was walking around trying to show everybody what I thought they wanted to see, and I was so unfamiliar with my authentic self that I never really showed anybody who I really was. It was always some version of me that I thought would make them happy. And, people pleasing, I think, is a big part of that false ego, that I've got to be something to everybody in order to fit in, instead of just being who I am and letting the universe bring who's supposed to be around me.
That's exactly right. And trusting that darkness, it's for a purpose, and you don't have to stay in there. Like I was convinced I was going to stay in that darkness for the rest of my life. The more I thought about it, the more that I was doing something wrong, the more that I thought about that, the more I was thinking I was a bad person. I went to Sequoia last week, and I was telling the community this at Change Your Algorithm. I said, Sequoia trees, which are these giant trees, they don't just need fire to survive. They like thrive off of it, because fire actually is so hot for sequoia trees that it's the only thing that can open up the seeds, and then eventually that's how sequoia trees grow. Decades ago, whenever there was a fire, the rangers would put the fire out, and then all of a sudden sequoia trees stopped growing, and they're like, oh, this is actually good for it, And so I tell people, depression, anxiety, addiction, like, yes, you feel like life is burning you right now, but it's up to you to ask yourself, like, how long is that fire going to go on for? Because once that fire ends, that's when you're going to grow. That's when you're going to flourish. And one of the amazing things about sequoia trees, like human beings, is that they're resilient. They don't have any flammable elements in their bark. It's so thick that when the fire gets to the inside of it, like, it's already softened up because the bark is so resilient. And I tell people that.
Wow, what an amazing perspective. And I think that speaks to, when a mistake, or an error occurs, you take the lesson out of it and then you leave it behind.
That's right.
It served its purpose only insofar as I often give people the analogy, which I think you'll appreciate, which is it's like a guided missile has a target. And it doesn't stay on that target the whole time. It'll drift and it'll course correct, and it'll drift and it'll course correct until it gets. And that's errors. I mean, it's like you drift and you course correct, and you find out what the error was that got you off course, but then you get back on course. And if you keep moving forward and keep learning from the lessons, I mean,
That's right.
I think mistake and failures, they really are mischaracterized because they're just lessons for us.
That's
they don't
right.
mean we're failures. It just means that something we tried didn't work the way we thought it should, and we learn from it. We course correct and move on. Otherwise, you and I'd be in a grave or isolated still.
That's right. Just because you fail at something doesn't make you a failure.
No.
And I used to think I was a failure. One of my favorite quotes is Nelson Mandela. He says, I never lose, I win or learn. And I love that.
I love that too.
I don't lose, I win or learn. It's so cool.
So tell the listeners how they can find you, and obviously we're gonna post all of the connections, but tell them how they can find you, and if you don't now, I highly recommend tapping into what Joel's doing. It's really a very simple way to get some incredible life lessons and to really grow the way you feel about yourself. So share how we can get a hold of you.
Yeah, for sure. So I post a lot of videos about mental health, recovery, all that fun stuff on my Instagram at Joel Relampagos. So it's at JoelRelampagos. And then my program, Change Your Algorithm. Our website is changealgorithm.com. And then our Instagram is at Change Algorithm.
Yeah, and check that out because there's lots of classes, there's lots of seminars, they're supervised, and I can just tell you from my own experience, connecting with what you're doing has been a big change in my life, and connecting with you has. And I just, again, driving up here to be with us and sharing recovery with you today and sharing life with you has been great for me. And like I said, the world is a better place with you in it, sir.
Thank you, brother. And honestly, I can't think of any other way I would spend my 500-day sobriety than with you, the man, the myth, the legend, fellow stigma smasher.
Here
Thank
we
you so
are.
much. I could honestly talk to you all day.
Right?
I might not actually leave.
I can't
Just turn
wait.
the cameras off. I'll just keep
We'll-
talking.
We started before, and we'll keep going after. And I'm just glad to share your story because I think there's so many lessons for people in the world today to realize that what you're chasing is inside you. It's been there the whole time.
That's right.
And if you can just start believing in yourself as much as you don't believe in yourself, it's easy to say what you're not, but if you can get good at saying what you are, and I think people view that as kind of conceited, but we're so apt to look at what we're not.
That's
so if you're
right.
so apt to look at what you're not, why won't you start looking at what you are?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Message of hope with Joel Relampagos here at Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. I can say this by looking you in the eye, man. I love you. Thank you.
Love you too, Charlie.
Yeah, awesome.
Appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, man.